Hey everybody, welcome to a part four of Storytellers. Right now, this is kind of a different take, mainly because the song I was doing is something that's kind of very dear to me. It's a song that's very complex, and so I've made a couple changes. Was able to find some equipment to make my guitar sound a little bit cleaner. Obviously, um, being in isolation, things have gone missing. One thing is like my fingernail clippers have disappeared. I have no clue where they are. And if you can see how long my nails are. Especially, you can kind of see how it's kind of peeking over the top of my fingers. So obviously, when you're a bass player and you're using your fingers to play, my nails kept hitting wrong notes or kept hitting the string above or below. Um, and it just got to the point where it took me 25 takes to really get at least one recording that I thought sounded great and good. Um, but yeah, when I talk about this storytellers thing, I guess the best title I could describe would be depression. Um, I was going to college, going to Anderson University, and enjoyed my time there. Had a lot of friendships, built a lot of community there. Something that very grateful for. And during my time when I was at Anderson, I lived in Smith Hall, so I would walk everywhere, walk to class, walk to the gym, since it was right there. And usually me and my roommates and even the people on our floor were very athletic, so we'd always go out and play games and do stuff. So I was probably in the best shape of my life. I gained some weight, but more muscle mass. I went from 110 pounds after I graduated high school to bulking up to about being about 135, 140 pounds. Um, so my junior year, I lived off campus with some buddies of mine. And as I lived off campus, there was a lot of things that kind of stopped. First, I wasn't walking everywhere and I drove everywhere. And once I'd be done with school and work, I usually would drive back home and start doing my homework because I didn't like procrastinating. So I wanted to try to get everything done. So in the evening, I could hang out with my roommates. As far as eating, I didn't have a dining plan at school anymore to save money. So then I was going grocery shopping, and the stuff I would eat would be like ramens and saltines and hot dogs, like really stuff that didn't have any nutritional value. So already that started to take a toll on my body. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't getting the nutritional value. Um, Obviously, I'd say probably at the beginning of my freshman year, my attendance at church began to spiral down. I'd go to a church and I'd fill out my visitor card. And I would say, hey, I like to be involved. I like to know more about the church. I would like to be, integrated into the life of the church. And it was like no one would follow up with me. No one would call me. I've went to a couple of bigger churches in the area, Church of God churches, and it was like nothing. Like it was like no one really wanted me to do anything. So it was like, okay, well, all right. So I would then go to some of the smaller churches in the area. And after being there for about 6 to 8 weeks, when you're talking to the same people and they're still asking you after 6 to 8 weeks, what's your name? Who are you? And it's like, I've been attending here for almost 2 months and you have no clue who I am. So eventually, that started to drip off. So obviously, as my nutritional health and my physical health started to diminish, my spiritual health started to diminish, my psychological health started to diminish as well. I became very isolated. I rarely wanted to hang out with people. Um, just kind of was always down in the dumps, and I could always point the finger and blame, well, it was this or it's that or whatever. But really, in hindsight, I was responsible for my own health and I just wasn't really taking care of myself. And I can remember one night my junior year, I was doing homework and I couldn't sleep. So then I started to just play games on Newgrounds, and I really don't know what happened. I must have like was just blindlessly clicking stuff, and then all of a sudden I found myself at a pornographic website, and that's kind of where my addiction to pornography started to take hold. And in that moment, it just felt a lot of shame. Because again, at this point, I mean, I'm already studying to do, I'm already a theater major, I'm a Bible and religion major, I'm planning on, you know, going to seminary after I graduate to, be a minister, to do ministry. And here I am struggling, struggling with this sin. And it was always hard because it was just like, I'm trying to work. I'm trying to do things. I'm trying to do whatever I can to fight it. I remember Steve Arterburn came and spoke at a chapel one day. So, I got the book, Every Young Man's Battle, and really was reading it. And then once I was done, I was rereading it. I was trying to do all the steps to really combat and fight against it. And I do good for, maybe a couple weeks, really try to overcome this. But then next thing you know, I'd fall back to old habits. Um, and, especially with me not going to church, because again, well, none of these churches want me. So what's the point in going? I'm already going to chapel. The every excuse that every college student at a Christian university, well, I'm already going to chapel, weekly. I'm a Bible and religion major, so I'm always reading my Bible. I'm always studying it. Look at me. Very, very self righteous mentality. And eventually it just got to the point where, I just felt bad. And then, especially, me working at summer camp for so many years, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm not going to be able to work at summer camp anymore because I'm still struggling with this. And I can remember when I filled out my application and they said, oh, what are some of the things you struggled with? I'm assuming because I know at one point I wrote about it. Um, so I don't think I was being deceptive. Again, this was, geez, years ago. But I remember just kind of writing stuff and saying, hey, here's what I'm struggling. And I mean, they still had me there. So it was great because they knew that, they knew my heart. They knew that when I'm there, I'm working. Plus, I mean, for me, I felt like summer camp was kind of my only saving grace, not because I was always in service every single day for 7 weeks. But at the same time, we had no internet connection except dial up. And yeah, even though we used my computer for video editing, like you couldn't really use the internet to browse anything because it'd take you. And plus, it was always in a common room, so everyone was in there. So there was always this accountability. And I'm like, man, this would be in a way, it's a perfect utopia to really fight against the junk I'm dealing with. At the same time, I felt like I couldn't tell people, especially at school, I couldn't tell people about it because I didn't want to be judged. So I really was at this very low point in my life. And especially at this low point, that's really when I met Laura, who's now my wife. And, she was good friends and we talk, and she was someone I felt like I can confide in with and kind of tell my life story, even told her about my addiction and really talked about that through much like anger and frustration and tears. Um, but through all that, she was the one who always was an encourager to me. She was the one who basically said, every Sunday morning when I didn't want to get up, she'd come into, and of course our locks were broke on the house, so anybody could walk into our house. She just would walk in and basically sometimes would have to drag me out of bed to get my butt back in church. Um, so then we go and we get there, and then, it's the same thing. I asked to be involved and nothing. It was the same. It was just the same things. Like, okay, well, and of course that was excuse. Like, well, why am I going? Because I can't be involved. And she goes, well, you don't need to be involved. You just need to be there to be fed. And and that was wisdom. It was almost like that word is kind of like the big smack across my face, saying, hey, wake up, you self-righteous Pharisee. So. But actually, the song. But no, before I get to the song, I think in those moments, like that junior year, even though that was kind of like my darkest, and even going to a beginning of my senior year, I really was starting to get out of that mess, and I really believe that it was just because I was going back to church. It was because I was trying to be more wise as far as making better meals for myself. Just don't eat hot dogs and saltines and ramen. Actually go and buy stuff and make something. And even though I get frustrated because my roommate still didn't know how to use a dishwasher, and I was still cleaning up all their dishes, and I mean sometimes they were probably still cleaning up my dishes as well. So it was a give and take. But overall, I think just going back to church, eating right, that really helped repair my mentality. Really started to kind of really started to overcome the addiction and the temptations that was going on, and I think that was kind of what really saved my life, because especially at this point, my especially at my lowest, I didn't even want to go to school anymore. I didn't want to be involved in my social club anymore. I was thinking about dropping out and just, I'll just go work back at a factory, which I don't even think is there anymore. So I'm glad I didn't do that. And I would have been in a different place in my life, physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, if I didn't have that support, and especially if I didn't go back to the service. So the song I'm doing is actually a song called "Low" by the Violet Burning. It's actually kind of an anti, almost, I wouldn't say anti, I would say it's almost like a reverse psalm in a way. It was a song that really is gripping, is very wonderfully composed, and it really talks about, in your lowest moments, that's when you can really find God, and where you can really be able to overcome, especially when you're afraid, when you're scared, when you're in these isolation, or even especially times when you feel like God's not there and you're just isolated and all alone. That's kind of where this song really shines, and it's wonderfully pieced together, wonderfully sung. I mean, it's just beautifully haunting and raw emotionally. So here is "Low" by the Violet Burning.